Coming up next, today's lead singer went through the most trying time of her life. One day she had to fire one of the co-founders of her band, and then 2 days later she faced the death of her right hand in the band, one of the greatest guitarists of his time. To top it all off, she was pregnant and going through a breakup with her iconic husband. Up next, the story of a true rock and roll warrior who rose from the ashes of losing her bandmates and created a song that could make the most heartless person break down. It's become a beacon of the 80s. Up next, the story of true rock and roll resilience. Gonna love it. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember coloring in your favorite coloring book as a little kid, sometimes coloring outside of the lines, you're gonna dig this channel of pure musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now to be a part of our Music History Daily, straight from the artist. You know, sometimes tragedy brings out the deepest, most profound reflection, especially for a songwriter. One sees the world in a whole new light and feels a spirituality they've never experienced. The affecting words and feelings seem to come from a different sphere, different plane of existence altogether. A place where enlightenment illuminates understanding and invigorates the soul. It's a feeling that somehow soothes desolation and evokes inspiration for complete revival. Chrissie Hynde found herself in a very emotional state in June of '82. She just lost one of her dearest friends who was a critical part of her past and her future. She was dealing with an erratic relationship with her lover, and she was in the process of bringing a new life into the world. Very difficult time for Chrissie. She was sad, she was confused, but she had to be strong for her unborn child and her career as the leader of the Pretenders. She found solace in her music and wrote what may very well be her greatest lyrical composition, which is really saying something. Talking about the top 5 smash, Back on the Chain Gang.
Back on the Chain Gang.
I have so much respect for Chrissie Hynde. You know, she put herself right in the middle of the dog-eat-dog, male-dominated world of rock and roll with an intrepid, unshakable relentlessness that couldn't be denied. Chrissie grew up in the blue-collar culture of Akron, Ohio. She attended Kent University for 3 years, where she played in a band called Sat Son Matt with Mark Mothersbaugh, who of course later formed Devo with Jerry Casale. Kent State is infamous for the Kent State Massacre on May 4th, 1970, where Ohio Army National Guard soldiers with rifles fired on the students attending an anti-Vietnam War rally. 18-year-old Chrissie was right in the middle of the gunfire and could feel the wind of the bullets whizzing by her head as she fled for cover, apparently. Of course, 4 students were killed, as we know, and 9 others were wounded in one of the lowest points of American history. One of the 4 students that was killed by the National Guard bullet was Jeff Miller, who dated one of Chrissie's friends. So Chrissie knew him. Chrissie was never one to follow a path of conformity. She wanted something much bigger than Ohio could give her. So in 1973, she moved to London to take on more danger with the rebellious emergence of punk music. While working odd jobs at the New Music Express and a provocative clothing store co-owned by Malcolm McLaren, Chrissie played in very early phases of The Damned, Clash, and the Sex Pistols. In fact, in a desperate attempt to stay in the UK, Chrissie asked Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious to marry her so she wouldn't be deported. A lot of people don't know that one. Dave Hill from Anchor Records heard some demos that Chrissie recorded and was very impressed. Despite some rough rehearsals with a makeshift band, Hill signed Chrissie and she proceeded to assemble a new group with James Honeyman-Scott on lead guitar, Pete Farndon on bass, and Jerry McElduff on drums. Now, McElduff was swiftly replaced by Martin Chambers, who had been in the Cheeks with Honeyman-Scott, and the band was named The Pretenders. It was actually a nod to the classic hit The Great Pretender by the Platters that went to number 1 on the R&B charts, and it went to number 2 in the pop charts.
Oh yes, I'm the Great Pretender.
Also went to number 5 in the UK back in 1956. The Pretenders' self-titled album was released in 1979. It was a smashing debut, earning platinum and gold honors all over the world. Sold over 1 million copies in the US as well. The fantastic success of their debut, of course, no fluke. After their first 2 records, the Pretenders were a vital part of the rock landscape, and Chrissie Hynde was a bona fide superstar at that moment. There was incredible chemistry between Chrissie Hynde and James Honeyman-Scott, or Jimmy as his bandmates called him. To Chrissie, Jimmy, he was her musical right hand. He was a brilliant improvisational player that never actually took guitar lessons. Now, Chrissie and Jimmy, they had contrasting styles, but like the old adage goes, opposites attract, and the two guitar players had great influence on each other. Chrissie gave Jimmy credit for bringing out the melody in her, as she would say. In an interview conducted by Guitar Player in '81, Jimmy explained their dynamic a little bit further. Jimmy pointed out that Chrissie had a unique style, one that he had never seen. Nobody plays like Chrissie, is what he said. It's real distinct, and half the time I can't count her beat. Jimmy did admit that in order to keep up with Christie's rhythm, he just puts a little guitar line over her riff, like the one that he laid down on Tattooed Love Boys from their first LP. Now, behind the scenes, the early road was rocky for the Pretenders. The band hit a brick wall in 1982. Actually, Pete Farndon's drug abuse had created a malignant strain within the band. Pete had great energy and what Chrissie called the heart of a boxer, but he grew unbearably belligerent and he was unreliable. Relations within the band got so toxic that Jimmy threatened to quit if Pete wasn't fired. At that point, to save the band from imploding altogether, there's just no other choice. Chrissie instructed the band's manager, Dave Hill, to give Pete his walking papers. Just 2 days after Pete was expelled, though, Jimmy, only 25 years of age, was the victim of his own drug demons and was found dead from heart failure induced by an overdose of cocaine. 10 months later, the collision course that Pete Farndon was on resulted in his death. Pete's wife found him in the bathtub at his home in London. He had lost consciousness after an overdose of heroin and drowned. At 30 years of age, another promising young career was over because of drugs. Pete's death didn't surprise anybody who knew him, but Jimmy's death, it had everyone reeling with shock and absolute devastation. Darkness hit Chrissie and Martin hard. I mean, they were the only two original members left. Even before Jimmy's death, Chrissie was dealing with an erratic relationship with her boyfriend, Ray Davies, and she was 3 months pregnant with his baby. That pregnancy marked the turning point of their relationship, going from a simple, carefree love affair to tense, vacillating harmony. There was a dichotomy of life and death that put Chrissie in a very complicated state of emotion. She thought of the good times, the bad times, losing one of her best friends, a breakup with a man that she loved, all these career challenges that lay ahead, and the nervous excitement of raising a child in the insane world that surrounded all of this. To capture her crazy spectrum of emotions, Chrissie Hynde began to write a song. So from all of this, Chrissie Hynde wrote a classic song, a reflection of life and a rally from tragedy. Eventually, you have to shake off the sadness and go back to work. Got to get back on the chain gang, she would say. The song begins with the reminiscence of a pivotal memory provoked by a photograph of Ray Davies that Chrissie found in her wallet. I saw a picture of you, you hijacked my world at night.
Would hijack my world at night.
And then later in verse 3, Chrissie goes back to that evocative photograph. That picture represents the happiest days of her life, a break in the battle, that Chrissie needed for balance in her life.
I found a picture of you.
It's the frustration of wondering why the happy times inevitably turn into sorrow, Chrissie poetically describes that gamut of emotions as the wretched life of a lonely heart. Of course, Back on the Chain Gang was not about a guarded pack of prisoners chained together with pickaxes, shovels, and sledgehammers to build a road or put in a railroad track. Rather, this was Chrissie's metaphor about being victims of the decisions and actions of others, the effects of world events, the phone, the TV, and the news of the world.
TV and the news of the world.
Got in the house like a pigeon from hell, threw sand in her eyes and descended like flies.
Threw sand in our eyes and descended like flies.
And then, with a heavy heart, you shake off the pain and you get back on the train to the everyday grind of the chain gang.
Back on the chain gang.
beautiful jukebox poetry. It still resonates. Even though the song is over 40 years old and I've heard it 1,000 times, those lyrics are like a dagger to the heart every time. Yet they're so motivating and magnetic. Let me mention today's sponsor. You know, every great band needed a name to put on the marquee, and today every dream starts with a domain. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform that helps you grab your name, build a beautiful site, grow your brand, and connect with your audience all in one place. With Squarespace domains, you can lock in the perfect name, no hidden fees, no surprises, and it comes with privacy and security baked in. Think of it as your band's logo. It's how people find you and how they'll remember you. And here's something I really dig. Squarespace makes it easy to showcase videos, whether you're teaching guitar riffs, posting exclusive interviews, or creating a premium library of content. You can upload, organize, and even monetize your videos with a paywall. It's like building your own MTV, only this time you're in charge of the playlist. So if you're ready to launch your idea, head to squarespace.com/rock for a free trial. And when you're ready to go live, use code ROCK to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/rock, code ROCK. Claim your stage and play to the world. Back on the Chain Gang, it was one of the first songs that Chrissie wrote after the death of James Honeyman-Scott. In the bridge, she assigns blame for the demise of her friend, pointing to the pressures of the music industry. The powers that be force us to live like we do.
Powers that be, they force us to live like we do.
She adds a premonition of doom for what the business has done. They'll fall to ruin one day for making us part.
They'll fall to ruin one day for making us part.
Thank goodness for Martin Chambers. He wasn't technically a co-founder of the Pretenders, Martin, but he was a valuable core of the band. He too felt the emptiness when Jimmy died, but he was there to help Chrissie through the grief, and together they carried on to make the deeply inspiring album Learning to Crawl that was released in '84. The great Chris Thomas was brought in to produce Back on the Chain Gang and to aid in the healing process for Chrissie and Martin. It was a difficult, fragile time for the remaining members of the Pretenders, for sure. Chris was like a soothing entree of comfort food since he was at the helm along with Nick Lowe to produce their critical debut record just 3 years earlier. He was an invaluable architect that helped create the distinctive sound of the Pretenders, for sure. Chris Thomas, alongside engineer Steve Churchyard, they were in the middle of the recording session for the Scottish band Big Country at that time. So he used a combination of musicians who were already in the studio to fill the positions vacated by Jimmy and Pete. There was Billy Bremner of Rockpile. He was hired to play lead guitar, and Tony Butler from Big Country played bass. They added the talents of session guitarist Robbie McIntosh for extra firepower from there. Bremner was an uncanny fit for Back on the Chain Gang. He took a look at the instrumental arrangement that Chris Thomas gave him and delivered the ultra cool guitar intro for the track in just one take. In an interview with Guitar World in '94, George Harrison insisted that the guitar intro for Back on the Chain Gang borrowed a chord sequence that he invented for I Want to Tell You on the Beatles' Revolver album. It was an E7 with an F on top that George immediately recognized when he heard Back on the Chain Gang. But he wasn't upset about the alleged copying. He was actually really flattered that someone used it. Very cool. Everything was set up in the Air Studios in London for Back on the Chain Gang to be recorded like a live band performance. The format worked well for everybody except for Chrissie. The musicians were kicked out of the studio while she recorded her lead vocal parts, which Thomas and Churchyard had to really pull out of her. They did everything they could, to make her feel comfortable. Now, Chrissie was usually all business when it came to recording her vocals, but during the recording of Back on the Chain Gang, she was uncharacteristically reserved and diffident. I'm sure her passive mood was brought on by all the overwhelming drama that she had endured to that point. Nobody was allowed back in the studio until Chrissie was satisfied with her performance, judged by many as one of her finest. I think it's her best.
Those were the happiest days of my life.
The mood lightened substantially when the team got to the background vocals for the chorus. Great background vocals, I love them.
We're back on the train.
Martin and Tony Butler provided the oohs and the ahs. But on first take, Chrissie didn't think they put enough oomph into their efforts, so she actually bent over in front of him and wiggled her backside when they were being recorded. Chrissie's comedic twerking, it worked like a charm, and they achieved the results that they wanted. The ooh and the ah that accent the chorus were, of course, inspired by the chants heard on the recording of Sam Cooke's 1960 hit Chain Gang. Before it was included as a cut on the Learning to Crawl album, Back on the Chain Gang was originally included on the 1983 soundtrack of the movie King of Comedy.
Well, maybe this is my big break. This is my big chance. You know what I mean?
The King of Comedy.
The Martin Scorsese film starring Robert De Niro. It was the first single released by the Pretenders following the death of James Honeyman-Scott. Back on the Chain Gang, it steadily moved up to number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was actually the highest charting single for the Pretenders in America, and it tied Brass in Pocket as the highest charting single in Canada. Track went to number 4 on the mainstream rock chart and number 17 in the UK as well. Back on the Chain Gang was, in part, a tribute to James Honeyman-Scott. After his death, the Pretenders forged ahead. They dropped 9 more studio albums with a 10th on the way. Chrissie and Martin always acknowledged how vital Pete Farndon and Jimmy were to the foundation of the Pretenders. The band wouldn't exist without them. Chrissie made that clear during her speech when the Pretenders were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2005.
And we're paying tribute tonight to James Honeyman-Scott and Pete Farndon, without whom we wouldn't be here.
6 months after Chrissie wrote Back on the Chain Gang in '82, her relationship with Ray Davies officially ended. But 3 months after the breakup, their daughter Natalie was born. Natalie Hynde, raised entirely by Chrissie, inherited her mother's feistiness. She's been an environmental activist for most of her life and has spurned much of modern day technology. Apparently, she doesn't even own a cell phone. Very cool. Meanwhile, Chrissie Hynde and Martin Chambers, they're still plugging away on the Chain Gang, making music and touring around the world. Actually, in 2023, the Pretenders released their 12th studio album, titled Relentless, featuring the melancholy ballad I Think About You Daily. It featured a string arrangement by Radiohead's Johnny Greenwood.
I think about you daily.
You know, Back on the Chain Gang, it's one of my favorite songs ever. And it actually deepened after my own dad passed away. I now think about him anytime I hear this song, especially the lyrics that say the powers that be, that force us to live like we do, bring me to my knees when I see what they've done to you.
To my knees when I see what they've done to you.
Think about my dad. He was a painting contractor and he worked as hard as anyone I've ever known to make a life for his family, and working with that paint and that varnish and all those chemicals over so many years, they did a number on him. About 10 years ago, he fell off a high ladder and he broke a lot of bones. He was just never the same after that. But he fought to rehabilitate his body and he got right back to work. My greatest wish was to relieve him of that stress and that labor and just give him rest. But he was bound and determined to put in a hard day's work every single day. The ending of the song, it always brings it back to the picture of him that I see in my mind. Him in his paint overalls with a smile, singing along to the music that we always listened to as he worked or as we talked. I'll just always think of him when it comes to this. It's been quite a journey for Chrissie and Martin, the Pretenders. For more than 40 years, they've been in the foxhole together, motivating and protecting each other as the leaders of the Pretenders. They were once brought to their knees by the powers that be when they lost true crucial members of their band, of their family. Yet Martin and Chrissie had the drive and the strength to stand up and persevere. They've given us an amazing catalog of music and inspiration, helping us through so many tough times to get back on the train, back on the Chain Gang.
Back on the Chain Gang.
Thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about the Pretenders and Chrissie Hynde and this amazing song. Johnny Marr, the guitarist of the Smiths, has said that James Honeyman-Scott was a huge influence on his work. You can definitely hear it. What are your memories of this song, of this band? Let us know in the comments below. What else would you like to see from the Pretenders? Share some of your memories. Again, a very personal song for me. I'm sure it is for many of you. Share your memories. That's what it's all about here, keeping the music alive. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friend.